My phone slipped from my hand and hit the floor like a gunshot in a silent room. I stared at the glowing screen, my blood turning cold as the words I had just sent burned into my vision. I want you. Not to a friend. Not to some late-night fantasy I'd never act on. I had sent it to my boss, and before I could breathe again, the 3 small dots appeared under her name, blinking like a heartbeat I couldn't control. If you believe that even our biggest mistakes can turn into second chances, take a moment right now to like this video, comment where you're watching from, share it with someone who needs hope, and subscribe to the channel. Stories like this remind us that kindness and courage can change everything. I wish I could say it was a brave confession. It wasn't. It was a stupid accident born from exhaustion and loneliness. I had been typing a message to my best friend, ranting about how complicated my feelings had become. I meant to write that I wanted a different life, that I wanted something real. Instead, in my haze of late-night overthinking, I sent 2 dangerous words to the wrong contact. My boss's name sat at the top of the chat list because she had emailed me earlier about a presentation. One careless tap, and my life tilted off its axis. Her name was Elena Ward, the youngest department head in the company's history. She carried herself with a calm authority that made even senior executives listen. But behind that polished exterior, I had always sensed something softer. The way she asked about my mother's health when I mentioned hospital visits. The way she noticed when I stayed late and quietly ordered food for the team. I admired her more than I dared to admit. I respected her too much to ever cross a line, and yet I had. I didn't wait for her reply. Panic drove me to type a follow-up message, a desperate apology, something about autocorrect and misunderstanding. But before I could hit send, her reply came through. "Can we talk?" 3 words. Professional, calm, terrifying. I didn't answer. I couldn't. My chest felt tight, like the walls were closing in. I imagined the worst. HR meetings, termination letters, my name whispered in hallways. I had worked too hard for this job. After my father passed away 2 years ago, I had become the sole provider for my mother and younger sister. This salary wasn't just money. It was survival. That night stretched endlessly. I paced my small apartment, replaying every interaction I had ever had with her, wondering if I had misread her kindness as something more. I hated myself for risking everything over a moment of weakness. By midnight, I convinced myself I would show up early the next morning and explain face to face, accept whatever consequences came. At 12:47 a.m., there was a knock at my door. I froze. Nobody visited me that late. My heart pounded so loudly I thought the person outside could hear it. Another knock followed, firm but not impatient. I walked toward the door as if I were approaching a verdict. Through the peephole, my breath caught. It was her. Elena stood in the hallway under the dim yellow light, wearing a simple coat over what looked like casual clothes. No office mask, no sharp blazer, just a woman who looked nervous. I opened the door slowly, unsure whether to apologize or explain first. Words failed me. She stepped inside before I could decide, her presence filling the small space in a way that felt both comforting and terrifying. For a long moment we simply looked at each other. The air between us was heavy with everything unsaid. She didn't yell. She didn't threaten my job. Instead, she asked quietly why I had sent that message. Shame flooded me. I told her the truth. About the exhaustion, about the pressure of being the strong one at home, about how I had been texting my friend, venting about how lonely I felt watching life pass me by while I buried myself in responsibilities. I admitted that somewhere deep down I admired her, not just as a boss but as a person, but I had never intended to say it, never wanted to make her uncomfortable. I expected anger. Instead, I saw something shift in her eyes. She told me she had almost ignored the message, assuming it was a mistake. But something stopped her. Something about the way I always carried everyone else's burdens without complaint. She said she had been going through her own storm. A divorce finalized just months ago, a leadership role that left her isolated, a constant need to appear unshakable. She confessed that when she saw those words, her first reaction wasn't outrage. It was fear, not fear of me, but fear of what she felt. The room felt smaller, the silence louder. We were standing on a fragile line between professionalism and something dangerously human. She made it clear that our roles complicated everything. She would never abuse her position. She would never risk my career. But she also admitted she had noticed the way I stayed late not for praise, but because I genuinely cared. She had seen my kindness in small, unnoticed moments, and somewhere along the way, she had begun to care too. My heart raced, not from fantasy, but from the weight of reality. This wasn't a romantic movie scene. This was messy, risky, real. We talked for hours, about boundaries, about consequences, about the unfairness of timing. By the time dawn's first light touched my curtains, we had agreed on one thing: nothing would change at work. We would remain professional. If there was anything between us, it would have to be slow, careful, and outside those walls. The days that followed were some of the hardest of my life. Every meeting felt like a test. Every glance carried unspoken tension. I feared coworkers would notice something different. I feared my feelings would betray me, but instead of weakening me, the situation forced me to grow. I started focusing more intentionally on my responsibilities. I enrolled in an evening certification program to improve my qualifications. I stopped defining myself solely by my struggles at home. For the first time in years, I allowed myself to think about my own happiness. Elena did the same. She delegated more instead of carrying everything alone. She smiled more often. The rigid distance she maintained softened, not just with me, but with the entire team. It was as if that accidental message had cracked open a door neither of us realized we needed. Weeks turned into months. We kept our promise. No secret office flirtations, no reckless decisions, just quiet coffee meetings on weekends, long walks where we spoke honestly about our fears. I learned about her failed marriage and how betrayal had made her build walls. She learned about the nights I lay awake worrying about hospital bills and my sister's education. We weren't rescuing each other. We were choosing each other, slowly. Then came the real challenge. A restructuring announcement shook the company. Rumors spread that some departments would merge and leadership positions might change. Suddenly, our fragile balance felt threatened. If someone discovered our connection during this transition, it could cost us everything. One evening, after a tense day of speculation, she came over again. Not as my boss, just as Elena. She looked exhausted, the weight of decisions pressing on her shoulders. She told me something that made my chest tighten. She had been offered a promotion in another city, a chance to step into an executive role. It was everything she had worked for, but it meant leaving. I wanted to tell her to stay. I wanted to ask her to choose us over ambition. But love isn't selfish if it's real. I knew what it felt like to sacrifice dreams for responsibility. I would never ask her to do the same. So I told her the truth. I told her she deserved that opportunity. That the woman who had walked into my apartment that night wasn't someone who should shrink her life for anyone. My voice shook, but my heart was steady. She cried. Not dramatic tears. Quiet ones that spoke of gratitude and fear intertwined. In that moment, I realized something powerful. The accidental message that had terrified me months ago had given us both something we didn't know we needed, the courage to be honest about what we wanted from life. She accepted the promotion. The last week before her move was bittersweet. We didn't make promises we couldn't keep. We didn't plan unrealistic futures. We simply cherished the time. On her final night in the city, she knocked on my door again. This time, there was no panic, only calm. We sat on the floor, backs against the couch, talking about how strange it was that 2 words had changed everything. She told me she would never forget that I had supported her dream even when it meant losing her proximity. I told her she had taught me that I deserved more than survival. I deserved joy. When she left that night, she didn't take my heart with her. She left it stronger. Months passed. I threw myself into growth. I completed my certification. I applied for leadership roles. I stopped seeing myself as the scared employee who had made a mistake and started seeing myself as someone capable of building his own future. One afternoon, I received an email from the new executive office. The sender's name made me smile. She had recommended me for a cross-branch project, not because of what we had been, but because she believed in my ability. That was the moment I understood something deeper than romance. Love, when it's healthy, doesn't trap you. It expands you. If this story has touched your heart even a little, please take a second to like this video, share it with someone who needs encouragement, and subscribe so you never miss stories that remind us how powerful honesty can be. And before we reach the end, I have a special request. Comment below with one word that represents a second chance in your life. Sometimes your story can inspire someone else reading the comments. A year later, I stood in a new office of my own, overlooking a different skyline. My mother's health had stabilized. My sister was in college. I had earned a promotion through relentless effort and quiet confidence. One evening, as I packed up to leave, my phone buzzed. A simple message appeared on the screen. "I'm proud of you. No titles, no fear. Just two people who had once stood at the edge of disaster and chosen growth instead." That accidental text didn't ruin my life. It revealed it. It taught me that mistakes can be doorways, that vulnerability, when met with respect, can become strength. And that sometimes the knock on your door in the middle of the night isn't the end of everything. It's the beginning of who you're meant to become. If you've ever felt like one wrong move defined you, remember this story. Sometimes it's the wrong message that leads you to the right future.